You know, the big thing that is the big challenge, rather, facing our state, and that is what has happened on Maui. We know that you've had an opportunity to visit on the ground there. Tell us a little bit about your impressions.
Well, first of all, my most important impression was getting a sense of the strength of the people there. I know that's sounding trite. I mean, we're saying it over and over again, but until you really get there and feel it, it really does. It's really just words. And so, Maui Strong is just that, Maui Strong. So that's the overwhelming impression. And but there's also kind of a sense that, well, we need to do whatever we're going to do better than we had it before. And so I don't know how you put, any specifics in this. It would depend on the issue, but that is the overall sense.
You provide a very unique perspective in that you've led through disasters before during your time as governor, of course, having to lead the state during Hurricane Iniki and the recovery efforts after that. I'm wondering if you can share with us what that situation was like and how this may be comparable to what we're seeing in Lahaina and some of the lessons that you learned during that time of how to lead during a tragedy such as this.
Well, it's comparable in the sense that, in the case of Kauai, the devastation was as widespread as it was in Lahaina. The big difference, though, was that as bad as Kauai was, there were not as many people who died, and so the psychological effect, in a sense, of Lahaina is probably deeper than it was on Kauai. Even if Kauai was island-wide. But yeah, the one thing about Maui that's really different is the fact that all of Hawaii seems to be engaged in doing something about Maui. When we had Kauai, everybody obviously were concerned about what was happening there. We needed to get started and like. And there was a great deal of efficiency and so forth, but we didn't have the sense of all the counties, for example, jumping in and helping. I mean, it's true that I reached over and plucked Harry Kim out of the Big Island, said, Harry, come over here and help us on Kauai. But the main difference, I think, is there is a kind of underlying sadness on Maui because of I think because of all the debts that didn't really necessarily exist on Kauai.
I'm interested to know, when you were making the decisions on what to rebuild and how to prioritize, how you did that as governor. When we think about what's happening in Lahaina, there are a lot of different voices in the mix, and there's a question as to who should actually lead the effort. Is it the mayor? Is it the governor? Is it community leaders who are who may be victims themselves of the fire? What are your thoughts on that? What did you do there, and what do you see happening here?
Well, Lahaina is special. Okay, so it's in that sense there is kind of an advantage because you can bring things into focus. You don't have to deal with all of the island. Now, we shouldn't forget that upcountry Maui also got affected, and it has its own little niche in this story. But the opportunity for us on Maui that maybe didn't exist on Kauai is the fact that it is centralized. It is in a special place, and it has a lot of people who are concerned about it. So what needs to be done? Everybody needs to step up into their role. And what's exciting is that seems to be a high degree of collaboration going on. But ultimately, Maui, Lahaina in particular, won't be what we want it to be without the state maximizing its resources and without the county maximizing their resources to bring about some kind of change. it's different. I mean, it's exciting in some respects. I mean, I find it exciting. Now, the people on the ground probably don't, but I find it exciting. I look at Lahaina as an opportunity really to change Hawaii. You know, if we handle, and I'm trying to find a way to express this thought, that we have an opportunity in Lahaina to deal with every problem that is plaguing Hawaii in its search for the preferred future. And it's hard to say that because it's coming out of a tragedy. But, you know, in a way, this is maybe this tragedy, as bad as it was, is a chance to start all over. You know, as the people like you, this is a chance to reboot.
You know, I want to ask, as we talk and we hear from those on the ground and those who are discussing about what Lahaina looks like moving forward, there also is a very large voice in the Native Hawaiian community that is advocating for certain things, restoration of certain waterways, and sort of a coming back to what Lahaina was before. As the state's first and only Native Hawaiian governor that has served in this role, how do you think the Native Hawaiian voice is important to what happens to this future?
Well, it's absolutely important because it's about Aloha Aina. And Aloha Aina wasn't necessarily as understood back when I was governor as it is now. So people begin to see that there are consequences when you don't take care of the Aina. You don't aloha it, right? So here's a chance for us to go back and look at the decisions that were made in the past that may have neglected what was naturally ours to begin with, like water. And so, you know, we can talk, one example of what I'm trying to say is that there is this discussion of the word ea, you know, which means life or sovereignty and the rest. And every time somebody says that word, people immediately think about governance. But it's also more than that. It's independence. It's water independence. So there's a conference going on right now, or shortly anyway, at Kamehameha Schools dealing with why ea. And you got to think to yourself, where are you going to test that? Where are you going to test the parameters of what it is to let water flow where it ought to take care of the aquifer like you should, but in Lahaina? But here's the twist, though. That by itself is not enough, because the other side of all of that, of what the aspirations may be for us to go back and do it right and love the Aina like we should, is the fact that 40% of the people that lost their loss of everything in the Lahaina fires may not necessarily come from that same cultural understanding. So the challenge, the leadership challenge, is putting it all together, because together is what makes Hawaii. So how do you do that? How do you take somebody who is saying, I lived there for these years, I saw the land being destroyed, I want to avoid that, and somebody that says, I came here for a job and I need it, and my family's future is built on it, and put it all together. We have all the tools. I mean, that's what we've been doing for 30 years, talking about this time, and it's come. I'm going to say one thing, and I'm talking too much, but it's really actually getting me excited in the sense that I'm not going to name names, but one of the most distressing thing was I heard one of our elected officials, who I think has a great future, you know, and a very talented person, tell me, like, you know, Governor, aren't you really glad you're not around during this time? You know, and I said, what are you talking about? You got elected precisely for this moment. Nobody needs you when everything's good. You know, what they need you guys to do is take advantage of this opportunity. This is not simply a matter of closing a wound. It's like building a better Hawaii out of it. You know? And that's exciting. That's like playing in the Super Bowl. Give me a shot. Let me run. Throw me a pass.
Well, that tension that you're talking about, that 40%, we really saw that come to bear with the governor's decision to reopen tourism, and a lot of folks saying we don't want it, and other people who live there saying, I need a job, I need that money to come back. If a reopening date causes that much conflict, you have to wonder, how do you actually make some of the much harder decisions that are going to come?
Well, I tell you, the first decision is better communication, obviously. And, and in the beginning of any one of these recovery scenarios, there's always a little sloppiness around the edges. It happened in Iniki, it happened. I think a lot of that is now being coordinated better. But yeah, so communication is important. And obviously people are wondering where they're going to live, and putting people in housing is important. But the state's got land there, for example. And while you're not going to sell any of state lands, maybe rental housing. This is your shot to build real rental housing for workers and the like. And also, but it's not enough just to think about how we're going to go back to what was. What are we going to do to invest in this Maui to make sure that the children of the people who are going to go back to work in the hotels have jobs in Hawaii when they don't want to do the same thing their parents did? Actually, there was when I was first starting out in politics, the business roundtable, invited to Hawaii a famous economist, Milton Friedman. And what Milton Friedman, he was a free economist, free trade economist. He was actually Barry Goldwater's guru. And he came to Hawaii and he said, places ought to specialize in what they do best. You guys do best with tourism. Oh, yeah. And he said, what happens with this is you'll do well, and people will earn money, and they'll send their kids to college, and the kids will go elsewhere. And he said, oh, wait a minute, what are you talking? Milton Friedman was predicting what is maybe happening in Hawaii right now, because no opportunity, cost goes up, and we're doing well with where we started. That was untenable then, it's untenable now. So this is an opportunity to not only restore jobs, but to invest in new jobs. Japan, when I was in office, the legislature actually created an investment fund of, I think it was 3 or 5% of the state budget to invest in the creation of new jobs. And as time went on, that got cut, which is a mistake, in my opinion. But, here we are. This is it. The Super Bowl is on, and it's time for people to get creative, think of new ideas.
I just want to ask you from your perspective. I mean, you have seen other governors take seat on the 5th floor of the state capitol, and having been there yourself, obviously a myriad of issues have happened since your time, including this Lahaina fire. But as someone who is now an outsider looking in, how difficult is it for you to just sort of sit back? I mean, you talk about wanting to jump in here and talking about this being sort of like a Super Bowl where there's an issue and you want to dive in. As someone who's led the state and you've seen other governors go on, how difficult is it for you to just kind of sit back and say, I'm going to let them deal with it?
I should learn how to do this, but more often. But it's not so much, and I tell people this is, I have my own ideas of what should be done, but it's not like I would be always right on it. The most important criteria is to do something, to get involved with for political leadership right now. My best advice is to take this as an opportunity. This is what you got elected for. So What are you going to do? Do something. The worst thing that you can do is think your job is to balance a budget. As important as that is, that's like a C. It's how you spend the money that counts. So is it really worthwhile to cut school repair at this time? I don't know. If we're going to talk about making Lahaina a place where it can be good for the future, maybe that's not what you do. Maybe what you ought to be doing is looking more at helping schools. That kind of conversation. What we have going for us, though, which is, and I got to emphasize this point, that didn't exist before, is this whole renaissance with the idea that Hawaii is special, that we love it, that all of us can have it, that we can build on something on that, as opposed to, what are we doing? I was disappointed. I was reading, I guess, an article, I think it was from the New Yorker, and they interviewed the gentleman who was complaining because when he called to get the water stream transferred, he was done. And his mindset was so alien to me at the moment, because what he was saying was, what he said was, we ought to do what God intended us to do, which is, grab land and use it and build on it and take the water and do all of these things. No, we were given this place so that 500 years from now, people could still be living in it.
When you talk about managing that diverse set of voices and Lahaina being sort of a special place and being different than having to rebuild an entire island, how did you do that on Kauai? How were you able to get the community behind you, given that there was such a diversity of experiences and of people?
Well, one of the things that was different about Kauai was the fact that, well, first of all, it was the whole island. And so there was no there was no possibility that you could open up hotels on one corner and not have it open on another. I mean, everything opened up altogether. So, there was a kind of a rhythm to it. But we faced some of the same challenges. I think that what maybe also different with Lahaina is we know much more about what is special now than we did then. I mean, back then it was simply a matter of, we got to open, if we're going to open up the hotels, we're going to have a couple more. We're just going to create jobs like that. I mean, now you got to ask yourself, is that the only direction that you go for? Obviously, the 40% of the people or more that worked in the hotels need jobs. So we've got to be able to take care of that as an immediate need. But that's not where it ends. I mean, where it ought to end is, what are we going to do with Maui College? What are they going to teach there that is going to be sustain a longer range community? And because nobody, whether your only interest right now is to work in a hotel, what you share in common with the person who wants to preserve the water is you both want your kids to be able to live there also. And unless we follow Milton Friedman's idea that every other generation should move away, that we've got to deal with that issue. Lahaina offers us the chance to start with a clean slate. I hate to put it like that, but it's a tragedy that shouldn't be wasted.
I want to follow up on something else that you had mentioned just moments ago about the Native Hawaiian voice and the way in which people are now proud of where we live and where we call it. That we have seen sort of this Native Hawaiian resurgence. And oftentimes in the past, we have seen this community that has been almost divided at times about what the future of the Native Hawaiian voice looks like.
Right.
There seems to be some sort of galvanization, at least for this part, especially around entities like CNHA, which has really helped to provide a vehicle for that. Do you think the difference is now with where the Native Hawaiian community stands, their voice, compared to when you were in office? Have you seen a change overall in just not only their ability to come together, but to get things done?
Yeah, I have. And, this is going to sound almost trivial, but I actually believe it. And that is the fact that one of the big differences today from, 30 years or 40 years ago is the fact that so many people have learned the language. And I get credited for doing a lot of things in the Native Hawaiian community, but I personally think my most important contribution was when I voted to make the state Hawaiian the state language. Let me say why. Because you see, it's not simply a matter of learning a second language. It's that in order to speak a language, what I've discovered is you start to learn how to think in that language. And so today, when we talk about the concept of aloha aina, for example, it's totally different. Even the use of the word aloha is totally different from what it may have been since before. Today, we can talk about how the islands actually own us. And our responsibility, in a sense, is to an older member of this universe. Now, before, that conversation just didn't come up in English, because in English, we own the islands. Now we got aloha aina, aina aloha. That concept, that broad understanding of a value system may underline maybe a biggest contributor, really, to the entire state of Hawaii. Now, what does that mean for the Hawaiian movement? I think that you can't have a drop of Hawaiian blood without being affected by something I call imi pono koalike, which is this quest for justice, this quest. So we used to, when that would be happening and people would be out, whether it was kaholawe or oha or all these things, people would be, initially everybody was, moving in the same direction. And then later on, people started to, my idea is better than your idea. But what they were forgetting is that when you look at the entire scope of things, and that, it's an advantage to getting old, I guess. You can look back and see the scope, is that this thing is like a river. It's like a river, it's not the fact, it's not the individual disagreement here and there. There's an underlying unity in the idea that we are all heading in a certain direction. And the direction, apparently, at least to me, is to do more of what, like I said, the Hawaii soul is in the concept of aloha aina, which means you take care of the land, then you create aina aloha, land takes care of you, which sustains life, which is aloha ola. So that understanding allows a lot of people to stand around in the same space.
That's a good segue to what we're going to be talking about after the break. We're speaking with former Governor John Waihee. We're going to be learning more about a new initiative that he is working on. Stay with us. Spotlight Now continues right after this break.
back to Spotlight Now here on Hawaii News Now, and we are very excited to begin a new segment here on Spotlight Now. It's going to be a segment that you're going to be seeing more and more often in the coming shows, and it's called Rediscovering Hawaii. So it's an initiative that is presented by the Hawaii Executive Collaborative, really to help shape Hawaii's future and talking about some of the different issues that are impacting our state and looking at it through a different lens.
That's right. A lot of folks at very high levels have been engaged in these discussions and workshops for the last 2 years now. They are now coming to share some of those discussions with us to try to bring it to the wider community and hopefully get you engaged as well. And so the first guest in this series, of course, is former Governor John Waihee. You've been engaged from the very beginning. So this is a pretty complicated subject, but it really ties into a lot of what you were already talking about in the first half of our program. For people who are not familiar, what is Rediscovering Hawaii's Soul?
I'd like to know. No, and I say that so facetiously, but for us, for me, it's an adventure. It's really trying to find out what's so special. Joseph Nava'i described the concept of aloha aina as like a magnet, or actually like a compass. In what he did this in Hawaiian, and it sounds so much better. But it was the idea that when you put a compass down, no matter where it is, it's always going to point north. And he said there's something about that for us in Hawaii. And I don't think when he was talking about it, he didn't only mean for Kanaka Maoli. He meant there's something about Hawaii that makes that happen. And so Rediscovering Hawaii's Soul was a chance to talk about what that might be. So if that is so, and I believe it is, then no problem that we have, no issue is unsolvable as long as we remember that we're all pointing to the same place. Now, the big difference between approaching that and I would say Western and Hawaii thinking is that in Western thinking, people have to own something. We own the island, we own the house. But the idea that the island might own you and not the other way around takes a lot of foundation. And I think the language thing we talked about in the last segment kind of laid it. So now people are beginning to think like, why does somebody like Ian Tungi stand up and say, I'm from Kahuku, when he actually lives in Seattle? What is this honing instinct? And that, to me, was the preliminary step in rediscovering Hawaii. So why are we bonding here so much? And even people who don't like each other have that same passion. Why? So as we were saying during the break, I spend most of my life politically talking about Hawaii's diversity and how exciting it is to be in Hawaii's being in a diverse Hawaii, and I still believe that. And we would say something like, our diversity unites us, not divides us, and we let it go. And what's for me anyway, and dealing with rediscovering Hawaii's soul is, I think the soul part is what unites us. So my thing right now, my trip right now is trying to going in this part of my life, working with what unites us, what creates the space so that diverse people can live together and prosper and create this place so that 5 generations from now or more, others can enjoy it.
Yeah, I think one of the unique things that I've noticed about this movement is it's more than just an ideology of rediscovering Hawaii. So in talking about it, we're actually seeing tangible things in action, and we're talking a little bit about the Hawaii Executive Collaborative and what they're doing in this initiative, to see the leaders that are being brought to the table here to really help to shape Hawaii's future. Some notable names within our community, both on the business and political side, but we're also seeing some very well-respected kupuna, Native Hawaiian practitioners who are also engaged in this conversation. I think, it's an opportunity where I've never seen, some of these business people standing side by side with some of these Native Hawaiian activists and finding commonality. If you can explain how this group has come together and the importance of that.
Well, this is, there's a technology that allows you to do this and hear it. But maybe, let me just give you experience. When I was in office, I had this crazy idea. And I said, we got Molokai out there, and every time I turn around, they're protesting something, usually about me. And I said, I got a cousin out there, and he's leading the it's Walter. So Walter, I told Walter, I said, Walter, I got a job for you. He said, what? He says, you can be my economic development director for Molokai. Okay? He said, get off it. Don't only talk about stuff. Show me how you're going to feed the people. This is an island that fed a lot of the rest of Hawaii. So where's going? And he took it. And he and John Sabas, it was a crazy situation. John Sabas and Walter Ridia, my economic development director, head of the Chamber of Commerce, was she was chairman for so long over OHA. My mind is sometimes, but anyway, that was a great group. So one of the projects they came up with was to take the fish ponds in Kauai and reestablish it. And Walter actually spent his life doing that. He literally went through every regulation the state had and worked it out. He had 5 fish ponds, been working on it, building it up, doing all of that stuff. And then as soon as he gets past all of that, he starts thinking maybe now we're going to have fish again coming out of Molokai. We're going to start making Molokai special. And immediately the federal government steps in and said, no. You can't do that anymore. You got to slow down. You can't refer. Why? Because it's a historic relic. See? So nobody was interested in, they wanted a museum instead of feeding people. Now, Walter brings that tale to this collaborative. And he starts talking about what they're really facing in Molokai. And not only that, but then they have a foreign landowner on Molokai who didn't really want to buy the land that they bought, but it came as part of a deal. And now it's just letting it go to waste while they look for some ridiculously high price, shopping more hotels or doing whatever. And his story, to hear the leader of what would be the grassroots protest segment of our community, explaining this to Merchant Street in Hawaii, and then have Merchant Street say, yeah, you know what, this is our Hawaii. So what we're going to do is we're going to help Walter fulfill, and the people of Molokai fulfill their dream to make this place what it used to be. And we're going to do that by confronting the capitalists who own Molokai's biggest land. So what do we have? The miracle that took place as a result of this collaboration is we have our capitalists and our activists acting in the best interests of Hawaii. How does that happen? That happens only when you can reach a space where both of them love the same thing. And that only happens when you can share it. You see, that's what, for me, was exciting. That's where unification takes place.
Well, and what's interesting, just so folks have some background, Hawaii Executive Collaborative has been leading these workshops in partners with Rios Partners to try to get all of these voices around the same table. You can read more about the entire initiative in Honolulu Magazine. They've devoted the entire issue to this initiative, and you have an editorial in there as well. One of the things I want to ask you about, because when we talk about Native Hawaiian movements and aloha aina and some of the things you've been talking about today, there can be a feeling from those in our community, and I know this from me, I grew up on the Big Island, but I am not Native Hawaiian, and there is this feeling of, can I really participate? Is this really my Hawaii too? Am I somehow pretending to be something I'm not if I use Hawaiian language or if I try to adopt these principles myself? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, in fact, that's part of this idea of what is unifying us, and if the place, the idea of aloha aina is not just for Hawaiians, it's for anybody who loves this soil, so I wrote that, and I talked about something called Ko Hawaii, and before we did that, we used to, when we were growing up, we used to talk about stuff like, we were trying to find ways of, when you grow up in a village, everybody, when you're in school, didn't matter whether you were Hawaiian, Japanese, or whatever, you guys were all bunched together. You were the gang, and so they used to call themselves us guys. Us guys hang together, right? But in those days, that was just a nice way of calling friends. What we didn't know was we had the solution when we would say us guys from Honaka'a hang together, because what we were united around was our hometown. So that's Tongi, right? Speaking from over there. Kahuku live in Seattle. So getting back to what bonded us occurred when all of a sudden you listen to people like Pua Kanahele talk about what aloha aina actually means. It's a reciprocal relationship with the people. So I wrote the editorial, and there's a kind of a backstory to that that's probably, in my opinion, just as interesting as the editorial. And just like you, I was in the workshop sitting next to this young woman with, which by the way means the age of my children these days, and this young woman, and she was she was sitting next to me, and she was listening to this. She's a big-time CEO now of one of the major corporations in Hawaii. And she looked up to me and she said, Governor, I used to dance hula for you at Washington Place. And she was in this keiki hula troupe. And I said, really? Fantastic, And she said, yeah, but when I got to be like 19, as much as I loved hula, and she apparently did it for years, and she got very good at it. She said, I decided I'm not Hawaiian. So, it's no longer my world. And other people said that, during the course of this. And I said, if you want to be Hawaiian, take the word. It's not even a Hawaiian word. It's a word, it was a designation. In the time of the kingdom, it was what we called everybody who was a subject. But it was forced on the rest of, it was used as a word of division during the territorial days because everybody was classified by their own groups. I said, but all of us share something. We all belong to Hawaii, and that's when I wrote this thing called Ko Hawaii, which is really kind of interesting because I don't know the word in English, the equivalent of ko, but it's a word meaning possession. So the noun that follows it means it possesses you. So we all share this common belief in Hawaii. We all love it. We all are equally responsible for making it better. And that was what this is about. And that's my search for the general population, for everybody. How do we unite? We unite by recognizing aloha aina. and that comes from the kupuna. That kind of unification is possible because we taught so many people how to speak Hawaiian, that concept that an island could own you is not foreign. It's accepted here. It's foreign in Western thinking. But by the way, Bob Krause, longtime reporter, I don't think he's with us anymore, wrote a book called The Island Way. And he was struggling to enunciate the same concept 40 years ago. And here we are.
One of the other things that has come about through, this movement of rediscovering Hawaii, through Rios Partners that has come in to help to navigate this time and space with all these individuals, were the various scenarios that they put forth and that were developed by some of these local leaders about what Hawaii would look like, 20, 30 years down the line. If you can explain to us the significance of the scenarios and how you think that's helping to shape this movement.
Well, I think the scenarios allowed people to talk about uncomfortable things, because what we were prognosticating was didn't necessarily have to happen. We didn't necessarily have to agree with it, but we knew one scenario, for example, was we knew if we keep doing things the way we're doing it now, that 20, 30 years from now it would be disastrous. Another scenario was that if America keeps doing what it's going through now and dividing the country, we may find ourselves floating out in the middle of the Pacific by ourselves. This is not something that some sovereignty activist was predicting. This is a real possibility that can happen. So how do we deal with a scenario that could happen? For example, the independence scenario was brought out, the first reaction was, "Oh my God! How do we get food into here? And how do we?" Well, maybe if that's a possibility, what we ought to do is become food independent. I mean, this place fed over 1 million people at one time. How do you do it? Maybe we should colonize Hawaii and raise taro again. You see? See, the excitement comes from not being afraid of what might happen, but taking the steps that would make life good if it did. And so colonizing Hawaii is an exciting concept. It's not, for those people who want to, it's like wine. The best bottle of wine, you would grow, that taro would be grown in the old-fashioned way. Hard work, brother. I know, I've done it. And I went to college because I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life, But people love it. And for that, you should pay a price. On the other hand, we got exciting young Hawaiians working at the University of Hawaii learning about agriculture that can grow taro using a drip irrigation, that making it better. As long as you're not, like mutating things and dumping chemicals on it. You by the way, that's another niche that you can see. This is the possibilities that come out of loving where you are, reacting to where you are. And for me, what I got most excited about was the idea is I saw the great divisions happening on the continent, to say I want to do everything I can to make sure that doesn't happen here. And that's where this whole idea about what unites us became important to me. So my personal mission is I want to move from ethnicity to something like nationality. Nationality being ko-Hawaii. We are all here without losing identity. See, that's the purpose of my little editorial,
And just so that people understand, Rios Partners is a group of advisors that hold these kinds of workshops all over the world. They work after apartheid in South Africa. They've worked in Colombia. They've worked all over the world to really bring people who were divided together, which is why HEC engaged them in the first place.
Oh, it's exciting.
You've done these, and for folks who want to read more, you can go to hawaiisoul.org to read about the scenarios that the governor is laying out and see what are some possible futures for Hawaii and what course we should navigate. When you think about the work that you've done so far, tell us how you think that could apply in Lahaina and how these principles...
Well, that's why I'm excited about Lahaina. You know, I don't want people to think that you got a little cheerleader hearing and people went through some kind of tragedy and I'm saying, oh, yeah. No, I'm enthusiastic because I believe, and sometimes you can, when you start playing around with concepts like I have been doing, sometimes you can get a little mystical about these things, But I believe there was a reason why Rizos came to Hawaii, why we started all of this at a time we probably needed it most. And as I told Dwayne Carrizo, who started this, is that, I've been through, in my course of my lifetime, a whole number of conferences where people meet and they're going to do Hawaii better than it is. And we keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, But all of a sudden with this Rios, with the Rios technology and the whole initiative, rediscovering the soul initiative, I think it's going to work. I actually told him this. I said, I really believe this can work. If you can peacefully end apartheid in South Africa, where, it was, people died daily over their behavior. Wow, here we have a chance. So, to me, as terrible as the tragedies are in Lahaina, at least there's something that gives us hope. There's a way we can all work collaboratively. There's a way we can all pull it together. As bad and as much as I hate the diaspora that's taking place in Hawaii, I now believe there's a way that we can start to mitigate it, to work with it, to take it. And the message doesn't always necessarily be here. I was I was at this convention in CNHA convention in Las Vegas. And I was telling people, take Hawaii with you. Bring home here. Where's your immersion school? Why? Because it'll teach the people in Nevada how to love their land.
No, I want to also, as we're running out of time here, but I do want to just also address some of the next steps because, as you talk about some of these initiatives and the conversations that's happening, one of the key issues here, or one of the key initiatives and goals of this is to really address some of the issues that we're facing. So whether, when we see some of the conflicts with, communities such as the 30-meter telescope, when we're talking about military presence in Hawaii, sustainable tourism, we're talking about ceded lands, all are issues that many leaders have been struggling to deal with for some time now. And these are issues that this group of individuals are trying to take on. How do you see the framework of what's happening here impacting some of those issues that we continue to talk about day in and day out?
Well, I think the most important ingredient in all of this, in this entire conversation, is the development of trust, right? So it's the creation of safe space where people can actually talk about it, talk about the, so you have one of the big issues coming up. It's going to be the renewal of military leases. And I think in the past we sort of sloughed over a lot of what that might mean because we assumed that we needed to have security, and that's still important. I'm not saying it isn't. But equally important now, the discussion needs to focus on an area that we never talked about in the past, which may have been driving a wedge on the entire issue, and that has to do with the fact that a military presence, unfortunately, seems to indicate environmental destruction. So now, to listen to when you sit down with a general and be able to actually express that without being defensive, maybe there's a solution. I don't know. But I do know that that is an issue that was hidden, and it's got to be talked about.
We know that these conversations are happening at a very high level with government leaders and, all the folks that we kind of laid out. How can the layperson take part in this? How do you suggest that people start to engage with these concepts now that we're starting to introduce them here?
Well, I think for me anyway, and I've mentioned this to people, is that the first thing is to, fall in love with the island. This works because this place is so special that we can leave our garbage in a can and actually talk about our future and who's important, what it is, and the like. And I think that we have actually gone through kind of a silent renaissance where people have been taught again about why this is home, why this is home for us. In a sense, the diaspora, as bad as it was, kind of contributed to that because it made so many people miss being here and then expressing it whenever they came here. I want them back, but at the same time, I think that reinforced something special. Whereas, maybe we were taking it for granted before. So, I'm a very simplistic person. I think solutions come, with very simple things. We've fallen in love again.
Well, Governor, we want to thank you for your time here today and just spending time outlining some of the things that you're seeing from your perspective as a former leader of the state, and also introducing, this new initiative of rediscovering Hawaii. So we'll certainly be talking about this in maybe months to come as well. So thank you so much. We'll be right back. More with us here at Spotlight Now right after this.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei-Suji. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders and taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, great catching up with former Governor John Waihee there. Again, we talked to him at the beginning of our conversation about his perspective of what he is seeing happening on the island of Maui, relating to a lot of what he learned during his time as governor and helped leading the state during Hurricane Iniki and the recovery efforts there.
Yeah, and interesting to hear his perspective that, the major difference that he sees is really the loss of life. And he talked about just the cast of sadness and grief that he still feels when he was on the ground recently in Lahaina, and how that's a very different scenario than what happened in Kauai. But he also talked about what he sees as a potential opportunity for the entire state, really talking about how the revitalization of this space, of this town, of this community can really ripple throughout the state.
Yeah, really had a poignant line saying the tragedy is something that we shouldn't waste, seeing that, noting that it is an opportunity for the state to come together and redefine what that looks like. We also introduce the viewers here watching to Rediscovering Hawaii, so a segment that we will be airing throughout our conversations here on Spotlight Now that addresses the future of Hawaii and some of the issues that the state is facing, and leaders throughout the state that are coming together to address this in a different way. We heard from the former governor about his stance, about his role in this, and why he felt it was so important for him to get involved and really sharing that Mana'o knowledge with future generations, but also to bring the community together to help tackle some of these big issues.
Yeah, as we mentioned, also Honolulu Magazine devoting their entire issue to this. You can read the governor's editorial there, or you can go to hawaiisoul.org to learn more about the scenarios and about this entire process. Very interesting stuff.
Yeah, we look forward to maybe catching up with him in the future. We are switching gears next week and catching up with some city leaders.
That's right. Ernie Lau from the Board of Water Supply will be here to talk about those rate hikes that are on the way, and also what's happened on Red Hill. And then we'll be talking to I'm forgetting now.
Jim Ireland.
That's right. Dr. Jim Ireland,
Yeah.
head of EMS. You know, one thing that's really interesting is the medical kauhale outside of Queens is going away. How will that impact the work that EMS does? Also heading into New Year's celebrations, always a busy time for them. We know that they are strapped for resources, so we'll be interested to hear. And also an update on the core program.
Yeah, a lot to talk about. We want to thank you for tuning in here again on this Tuesday to Spotlight Now. We want to encourage you to be involved in the conversation. You can always follow us on Facebook and enter your questions throughout the show there, or of course watch it on television. We also of course rebroadcast, and there's a podcast as well, so a lot of opportunities to engage in this conversation and as we leave here today on this Tuesday with a beautiful shot of Honolulu and the cloudy skies over our island. We'll see you right back here next week Tuesday.
Aloha.